creatives tend to be a lot more in tune with how they feel. They're a lot more intuitive, probably a bit more introspective. And so encouraging staff to be creative and then rewarding them for that, I think is such a great way to just say, do you know what, you've done a really good job and I really value and appreciate what you do.
Because of the number of messages that people are exposed to on a daily basis now, if you're not thinking creatively, then it's very hard to get cut through.
I struggle to be creative in cold spaces. I can't be creative. If the room's cold, I always have a blanket on me.
Welcome to this latest episode of Comms Cast with Jersey Road. I'm Liam Flint, Comms and Marketing Officer for Jersey Road, and delighted to say that I'm joined by a couple of guests to chat through our next topic, which is how you can unlock creativity for your comms team in your charity. So I have with me Managing Director Gareth Russell. Gareth, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good.
Excited for this, to hear about all your experience in creativity.
Yeah, well, I brought my special cardigan out today for talk about the creative flow.
Yep, thought long and hard about your outfit.
It's pretty fancy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I specialise in fancy.
And we need to introduce Storm. So Storm Cecile, you are a international spoken word artist.
Exactly.
I've nailed it.
You have.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's
I'm
all right.
super excited to be here.
And we've got no rush because you've got 3 hours on your parking. So
I do.
This can go as long as we need it to go. So I'm glad about that.
I'm happy about that too. I mean, I've anticipated that this might be longer than 40 minutes.
Yeah, you got loads of faith in us.
But 3 hours parking in central London is about the same as your mortgage, right?
I know. I've had to sell half my house to get there, but it's all good.
We'll make it worth your time, we promise.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're here to talk about unlocking your creativity as comms teams. So Storm, just for the sake of people listening or watching, can you just in a nutshell explain what you do and why you are just so creative? Where's that come from?
Yeah, so my name is Storm. That is my real name. That's a whole other conversation, essentially. But I'm a full-time poet, so I've been doing that for a couple of years now, and I've always been pretty much part-time since of working age. And I've worked with several organizations to help them tell stories about their clients or to work alongside fundraisers and conferences and things like that. So yeah, worked with a few cool people. I've done the Nationwide Building Society advert. I've done some work with CAP. I've done some work with a big church festival and a few of the other brilliant organisations in the sphere.
Brilliant. And Gareth, we're big advocates, aren't we, of what Storm does? Very impressive.
Yeah.
Just rattled off there a few of the clients. Brilliant.
Yeah, well, we I think it was probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we were at an event in Scotland, and Storm came onto stage, and she came onto stage in this dress that was like, it looked like it was just diamond dress, but then did this spoken word piece that was incredible. Like, the whole room was just absolutely engaged with what she was doing, so you could tell that she was an absolute legend in her field. But I'm quite interested. This is not on the script. Not that we have a script. This is all obviously very natural and authentic. But how did you get into this? So when you were young, were you writing when you were young, and then you enjoyed writing when you were young, and then there must have been a moment then you were thinking, is this a career or not? Just talk us through a little bit that process.
Well, I started writing when I was about 6. I was incredibly bored during the summer holiday, and my dad said, why don't we write a poem together? And I remember thinking, like, why would I want to do that? Who wants to sit and write a poem? And I wrote this poem called School Break, and I just fell in love with words. My dad is not a writer, he's a builder. And I always say, like, I'm the builder's daughter because I build in a different way.
Yeah, right.
And so that's how it started. I then entered a competition in the Newham Mag, which is basically a magazine that goes into all of the houses in Newham. And I won that. I can't remember what age I was, but it was definitely before I was a teenager. And it went in basically all of the houses in Newham. And so that was how I started.
Yeah, wow.
Really exciting, yeah.
And you then continued that, but when you decided this is what I want to do for a living, just talk a little bit about that moment. Well, I'm sure it wasn't a moment, but that season.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like there are waves and stages of that. I joined the collective when I was 14, and then I did the nationwide advert when I was about 18 in my first year of university. Yeah, I'm 25 now. I feel old. It's quarter century now.
Experience.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, I mean, I was essentially doing that. But I think the breaking point for me was I really want to tell stories, and I really want to do that in a way that is genuine, authentic, and honest. And if I can't do that, I'm almost wrestling with myself.
Right.
So it got to a point where I realized that actually, if I don't do this, it's almost going against the internal calling that I feel that I have. And so that moment was about 2 years ago, and literally just started doing it full time, and I haven't stopped, and all the doors have just opened just by saying yes.
And Liam, I will let you ask the question that you were dying to ask.
These are great questions.
But just a few weeks or months ago, January, I think, you did Passion Conference.
Oh, that was so good.
In Atlanta, right?
Yes.
How many people were in the stadium?
65,000 young people.
And you were on a stage performing something you'd written. Just tell us about how that felt.
So I didn't actually write that.
Okay.
That was actually scripted by Passion Church, by a guy that he's absolutely brilliant at what he does. Some of the stuff that I do is written by me. Well, most of it is, but that wasn't. But it was a surreal experience. I mean, 65,000 people in one space. It was incredible. The feeling was surreal. But also there was just something really special about the staging, the design, it was an immersive experience. Right. It wasn't just a poem. It was something that people could engage with, and it almost felt very simple, but it was so effective and clear that people could respond to it in a way that touched them.
That's amazing. Love it.
Wow.
Thank you.
So now we know you are credible and you are great. I mean, 65,000, that kind of just nails it, that, yeah, you are someone to be listened to, and you've got lots of wisdom to impart to get on that kind of platform.
You.
So we're very fortunate to have you helping us to be creative. And I mean, that's the whole point of the conversation. We want to equip charities to think, right, we'll want to be more creative. There's no one who doesn't, but it's a way of channeling it and finding out within my team, how can we best cultivate an environment, a culture that allows that? Are there certain things we're doing to get in our own way? Are there obstacles to overcome? So it'd be great to pick through some of those things. And Gareth, just interestingly, even for us, a journey at Jersey Road has been, we want to be more creative as well. Even as an agency, that's something that we think we can improve on, and we see the value in even internally, don't we?
Yeah, I think there's a danger when you're working on so many projects and you're working on so many campaigns that you can easily get into the habit of cookie cutter approach, and not. We've talked a lot about insights in these podcasts and understanding your audience, but actually being creative, because of the number of messages that people are exposed to on a daily basis now. If you're not thinking creatively, then it's very hard to get cut through. So I think we've definitely tried to encourage the team to think, actually, let's not just go for the standard approach to every campaign, but let's think, what's this campaign actually trying to achieve, and how can we creatively approach that to really achieve the cut through that we're looking for.
So Storm, let's talk about your creative process then. Let's jump right in.
Right.
What brings you creativity? At what times would you say you're most creative? Do you have certain places, times, locations, thought processes that bring out the best in you, or not?
I would say I don't have a specific time where I feel like I'm most creative. For me, I almost consider my life as a creative project, and then creative projects just kind of birth out of that thing. So I like to experience a lot of things. I like to travel a lot. I like to see different places. And then in seeing those different places, I get inspiration and insight. I also love to read. I'm such a nerd when it comes to reading. I absolutely love reading. I like to read a variety of topics. I like to understand things, because in order to be a good writer, I have to be able to understand what people are thinking, and not just even what people are thinking, but also the context and history of things. So I spend a lot of time reading. I spend a lot of time daydreaming. I spend a lot of time thinking and allowing my mind to have the capacity to do that.
Are there particular questions that you're asking yourself in that creative process that kind of provoke some of that thinking?
Sometimes I ask why, but I feel like sometimes why can feel a little accusatory. So sometimes I ask how. How have you got to this point, or how has that happened, or how can we improve this? Or it depends on what I'm doing, obviously, but I tend to ask those questions. I think also one thing I think a lot is what was, if I'm reading like a history book, for example, and the author has a particular point of view, and I suppose I'm more thinking, where's he coming from? Is it biased? Is it non-biased? Is it, where is he getting this idea from?
What's
and
the context?
What's the context? Because I think that's important, because everyone tells a story in the way that they see and view the world. So how are they viewing the world, and how am I interpreting what they're presenting to me? If that, hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does. Yeah.
It feels like, for me especially, and I'm not hugely creative compared to you, of course, but I think for me, creating the space to be creative is the battle. And you've mentioned it there, that you like change of environment, you get yourself out, you like to experience new things.
Yeah.
And just thinking with like the charity hat on, often when we're in organizations where there's time pressure, we may not have a massive team, we've constantly got one thing after the other. Agency life for us is like that as well. You can often feel like there isn't space for me to actually take, what we used to call like a blue sky day, where you just go away, you get some paper, you maybe go out in nature, you talk to some people, listen to music. It feels like a lot of people might listen or watch this and think, great, but I have a stacked 9 till 5. We've got loads of campaigns to do. I'm trying to do fundraising, marketing, socials. We've got meetings, board meetings. So I think creating the space is, would you agree, is a massive part of allowing yourself to disconnect. So whatever it looks like for you normally, getting away from that, for me anyway, seems to open that door more.
Absolutely. And funny enough, I'm currently reading a book on creativity, and it has a series of essays in it. And the essay I'm currently on is How to Kill Creativity.
Oh, wow.
And it's really good. It's by HBR. It's this book by HBR. I cannot remember the author. But the essay essentially highlights that there are certain things that kill creativity, and one of them is resource. Sometimes having finite resources or finite time can encourage creativity, but if done incorrectly, it can actually take it away. And one of the things that I definitely find within my own creativity is I need an environment that is conducive to creativity. So one of the things for me, this sounds really basic and simple, but I struggle to be creative in cold spaces. I can't be creative if the room's cold. I always have a blanket on me. I said to you guys earlier, I'm traveling to do some writing at a retreat in a few hours. I brought my heated blanket with me.
Key essential.
Yeah, it's a key essential for me, because I can't be creative in the cold. But that's also environmental, and it impacts how I think, it impacts how I process. So I think it's sometimes what organizations can do is just creating quiet spaces around the workplace or in the building that they're in to encourage that. And also sometimes some people are more creative at home, or they're more creative. It's not necessarily, we may have time constraints, but what if it was like you have a free day to go and work in a coffee shop, or you have a free day to work at the studio that we may have rented, a couple of blocks down the road. Like, there's alternatives that mean that work doesn't have to be compromised, but people can still be creative.
That's right. And I think the important thing here is that when people are as busy as you're, describing, if the danger of not being creative is a strategic danger of not being able to actually effectively outwork whatever it is you're trying to outwork and achieve the objectives. So not having it in your diary, it's not a luxury. It's something that is actually core to helping you stand out as an organization from other organizations. So if it's not a priority, it should be. So you need to lose some stuff in the diary. I know it sounds easy to just say lose stuff in the diary and put it in, but that it has to happen, because otherwise you're going to become a dinosaur, or you're going to become just fade into the grey with everyone else. And so what we've tried to do that a little bit with us as a team. We're still learning this and still trying to improve this, but scheduling, because our team are also remote first, so being together, I think is, I mean, I know you like to go away as well on your own, and which for your art form, you know, makes a lot of sense. But I think for teams that we're talking about, being in person is helpful. I think it's very difficult to, I find it very difficult to be creative on a Zoom call or a Teams call. But I think being together, doing it where there's no distractions, maybe bringing people in who are from a different sector or from a different space that can, you know, we brought Storm now onto a Zoom call, which I'm just going against what I've just said, but we brought Storm in. You know, Storm, there's some overlap, because a lot of what she does is speaking into current affairs and speaking into news, stuff that's happening in the news, which is obviously what we're dealing with on a daily basis, but she's coming at it from a completely different space, wanting to bring spoken word in. But that was a great challenge to our team to think differently about how they're approaching their work. So I think creating the space, if you can do it in person, and then having people or organizations or experts, whatever it might be, that are coming from a different perspective to just challenge some of your thinking, I think can be very helpful.
With what you're doing, Storm, obviously you are a solo artist, and like you said, you're about to run off, you know, for a retreat for 3 days and say see you later world. But do you still benefit from getting around other creatives? Would you have other poets or just people who are writers that you'd be like, oh, I want to run this past you? Or are you just, leave me alone, I'll create? If you get me in a room with people, then that'll irritate me.
That's a really good question. I think in the poetry sector, people often work in silos, and a lot of that is because a lot of it is a heart project. And what I do is a little bit, I feel like, has a little bit of a niche to it, because I'm writing other people's stories, and that's my job. So I'm not necessarily writing what I want to write, if that makes sense. My focus is getting into somebody else's brain and understanding how they think. So connecting with other poets is helpful for the critical aspect of what I'm doing. Does it make sense? Does it structurally make sense? But a lot of what I do is go to everyday people and just ask them, what do you think? Does it make sense to you? Does it apply to your story? What would you add to it if you were writing this? And I find that quite helpful, because yes, poetry and poets are great, but sometimes we can be so insular that we're thinking, you know, I want to write this in a really creative way. I want to write this in a way that feels unique or different, but might not actually make sense to the average person.
Yeah, that does make sense. I think for me, I'm someone as a creative who does enjoy having space to be creative. So I find I am much more, even though Gareth said we're all remote at Jersey Road, I like that in a way, because I can go to a coffee shop, I can be around people, I can get inspiration, but I'm by myself. I find if I'm on a brainstorm or a Zoom call or even just a physical meeting, I don't get across what I would necessarily want to or get inspired in the same way. So I suppose it's just personality. But
absolutely.
Gareth, how does it work for you? Are you someone, as managing director, are you someone who needs to bounce off other people, or are you an internal guy?
I'm an external processor, so I can have an opinion on something, but I think it's important just to have a humility in it and listen. So, you know, you can put your concept, your idea out there, but then it does need to be iron sharpening iron at that point, and just allowing the creative process to hone that concept. So I much prefer doing it in person and with other people. I often find that when I'm on my own, I'm just sort of sat there, just sort of trying to figure out
talking to yourself.
But I used to be a real 110% extrovert, and I've learned the value of time to myself over the older I've got, I think, and I think there is actually a place for both. But I think that it's maybe just being clear about what you're trying to achieve with the time that you're spending, whether it's on your own or with other people.
It's true. I think both are beneficial, and I think there's a time and a place for both, because some of my best ideas have come by me experiencing something by myself and then having the desire to write about that. But also, there's also real value in seeking ideas that are not necessarily coming from yourself,
Right.
but are being built on by other people, which is why teams are really important, because people have strengths that other people don't have, and you can kind of balance those things out. And I suppose based on the diversity of the team, you can see and gain different experiences and collate them into something that is really unique and special. Whereas if you're just getting everything from yourself all the time, you tend to have the same pattern of thinking, the same patterns of creativity. You have to kind of come out of that to kind of get a new idea and a new perspective.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah, you don't get out of that bubble. Is there anything on the flip side that would stifle your creativity, or you think that's actually really unhelpful for me? I mean, we've spoken about being around too many people, but is there anything you'd actively try and avoid?
Turning 26, what's really interesting is I'm about to pass the quarter century mark, and one thing I'm realizing is there are little things now that I just realize that I just don't like, and when I don't like them, they kind of throw me off the creativity. So one of those things is being in a space that's messy. For me, if I wake up in a messy room, there's just something that it just grinds my gears, and I'm like, oh, I can't do it. It's just, then I'm flustered, you know? And so I think part of it is, I mentioned earlier about almost creating a life that is creative rather than having these moments. I'm at the stage now where I'm trying to create a life that, okay, I wake up, if I feel the need to be creative, I'm not rushing to find a pen somewhere. There's a notebook and pen right next to me when I wake up. Great.
You're making it easy.
Exactly. I'm not tripping over everything to get to my desk. Like it's creating this space that is conducive to being creative at any given moment. So I think for me, it's the little things in life, you know, try not to be overstressed. Overworked is a real big one for me. If I'm overworked, it just doesn't work. And that's not to say that life isn't hard sometimes, but it is to say that there's a balance between things that are being made difficult versus life kind of just being thrown at you in some sense. And so I think that's a real balance that I'm trying to keep at the moment.
I'm just thinking about the time pressures that you're under. I mean, you've spoken to Gareth and I about some of the projects you do, and the reality is you'll meet with a client, they'll give you, this is what we'd like for the brief, there's a deadline, you've got to go away and deliver what they want. Yeah. And so I just think, oh my word, even if I went away for 3 days by myself, what if I get a block? What if I can't actually put into words their values or what they want? So I think for me, that's a personal thing. Whenever I feel real pressure of time, when it's a tight deadline or I've got 100 other things I need to do, which again, I think charity communicators will all say, yeah, that's me. I find that is often what scrambles the brain and stop. When you need to be creative, I often then I can't be because there's so much pressure on this. Do you have that, you know, before you get up in front of a crowd of 65,000, you're like, oh, what if I have nothing to say? Or do you manage pressure and stress well to keep yourself
I think everything is planned in advance. So I never go on a stage not knowing what I'm going to say, because poetry, or the poetry that I do, is commercial. And so it's not a free thought sort of, you know, conscious flow of, you know, lines. It's very specific. I've planned, I've practiced. I think when it comes to charities, sometimes they don't actually know what they want. And so that's a starting point. Okay, do you actually know what you want? Do you actually know who your audience is? Do you actually know what you want to achieve? And so once we get past that point, writing has a science to it. There's a science to creating a poem that is more emotive or more informative or more strategic in encouraging somebody maybe to give or be generous. But I think for me, like I tend to write in a way that fits the brief, fits the client, but I'm also trying to make sure that I'm aware that there's a specific way that I have to write in order to receive a particular outcome.
Yeah.
And that's just the science. I think there's a science in every field, but for poetry, that's a science I follow, and I stick to that. And sometimes there are creative barriers that I can go outside of that. But I think it also goes to show that even within creativity, there are some parameters that one has to follow in order for it to have a particular outcome. Otherwise, it's not going to achieve what it needs to achieve.
Yeah, that's really helpful, I think, because I think quite often people think of creativity as a sort of free-flowing, it'll whatever will be, and you're sort of just floating around waiting for the next idea. Actually having some structure, and it's a bit like a football pitch, where in a football pitch there are lines, and there's a penalty area, and there's boundaries, and there's things that happen, but actually inside of those boundaries the players can show their creativity and their flair and whatever else it might be.
Good analogy, Gareth.
Thank you.
I was wondering where you're going with that, but that was good.
Finger clicks.
Yeah. I'm very good when I get going.
Come on.
Yeah, I just think what Storm's saying there about, as you've said, the boundaries and the pressure and handling that. We all face pressures in life, and we all have lots of things to do. And even for us, Gareth, we have tight deadlines, we have campaigns, we have client work we're working on. We're often juggling, aren't we, many at a time. So I think what you've done really well as a culture at Jersey Road is allow people to have space. So we have brainstorms, we're able to touch base on calls, because as an agency, we wouldn't get very far, would we, if actually we said, well, we've got 4 client meetings to do today, or these proposals, but I'm afraid, we don't have time. We're just going to focus on this one. I think that's something we've worked on a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we do it because it actually values the clients. If you're just kind of copying and pasting all the time, then it's actually devaluing the objectives. It's minimizing the recognition that different audiences require different approaches. And actually our team are not motivated because they want to use their creativity. It might not be that they're, not everyone feels creative, but everyone I think has creativity in them. I think it's just that they express that in different ways.
Needs to be channeled properly. Storm, people listening to this right now may not have come across some of your work. They might be like, I'm interested into what she actually talks about. What's the content? What are the issues she talks into? And we've noticed the thing we really admire about you is you speak into a lot of current issues. And obviously you're working with clients, you work with faith charities, they have a certain message, and they say, right, can you align with what you're about to say there? And lots of charities, faith charities we work with, they're desperate to get their message across, which is a faith-based hope message, but they also want to reach the masses, and they want to position a message where you're not going to alienate anyone, but they don't want to water down their central values at the same time. You've spoken into things that are tricky. You've done some, you can talk about the things that you've done there that could be divisive, or socially people would be like, I love this. Some would say, I don't like this. How do you work on positioning your message so that you can be clear, but also that you are appealing to everyone, you're exclusive at the same time? What advice would you give around that?
I think sometimes we do want to be all things to all men, and we try our best, but we also have to acknowledge that sometimes we just can't do that, no matter how much we try. But what I will say is that I take my job as somebody that is not there to necessarily change your mind. I'm there to encourage you to think. I'm there to encourage you to challenge if you believe what you really believe, and allow you to come to your own opinion. Or to your own conclusion. So I don't write in a way that says you should do this, you should do that. It's suggestive. What if? That language of what if, rather than you must, because nobody wants to be forced to believe anything. And I think that's the gospel message. When you think about how Jesus did things, he was not saying, a lot of the time it wasn't like, I'm coming to you and this is it, and that's point blank period. Like, we look at when Nicodemus comes to him by night, we look at the paralyzed man on the stretcher. A lot of these things are people are coming to Jesus. They're asking him, and then he says this, and this. So I think with a lot of my work, I'm not trying to force you to change your mind. I'm almost like probing you and challenging you.
It's a provocation.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, I don't think I can change your mind. Like, that's up to you. And that means that people have their own ways of thinking about things, their own viewpoints, their own perspectives. But all I am there is to be, I suppose, a little bit of a mouthpiece, a little bit of a disruptor to kind of say, oh, didn't think of it that way. And that's okay. So I think in the way that charities can do that is when we're looking at campaigns, I'm reminded of, I did a campaign with CAP, and it was with Carrie Job, Cody Carnes and Martin Smith. And I was asked to give an ask in the middle of the concert, and all I could think was, oh my gosh, this is going to be like stressful. I don't know what the return on this kind of thing is going to be. Yeah. It's quite difficult because where we are. But actually, by doing the poem first, everybody was like absolutely floored and incredibly touched by the stories because they were personal and everybody can relate to it. It was then a lot easier to give the ask because everybody can find themselves in that story, even if they don't personally relate to it themselves. So I think it's the point of connecting with each individual in some way. If you're doing for example, Samaritans, they're talking about mental health, and maybe not everybody has dealt with suicide or something along those lines, but everybody can relate to being down. Everybody can relate to having a bad day, So it's kind of finding those anchors within that and then saying, okay, how can I expand on those things and reach the masses? But then you also have to understand that you might not be able to do that all the time.
Yeah, of course. No, I think that's really helpful because, Gareth, that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. We're always trying to help faith charities to get that balance between being authentic. This is our value, but also we're trying to appeal to people who actually maybe not want to hear this or need to present it in a way that is creative in order to engage everyone. That's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, and certainly a lot of what Storm's work and a lot of the work that we do centers on is stories. You've said this already, but it is, rather than well articulated arguments, it's the story behind the issue. And I think when you talk about your own story or when you talk about other people's stories, and then when you talk about actually stories on either side of the argument, if there is an argument, which Storm's done in a couple of her written spoken word pieces, there's something really powerful about that, because it's not looking to make a point necessarily, it's just looking to tell a story. And I think when you hear that, and I think that's actually where most charities should start, rather than trying to say which issue do we want to change the dial on. I mean, they can do that, but I think when you start with the stories, the opportunities for creativity are massive, because you can tell stories through so many different channels in so many different ways. You can tell them first person, you can tell them third person, you can you can use video content, you can use social, you can use written. So that if the story is central to what you're trying to do, I think that's what unleashes then the creativity to be able to tell those stories in different ways.
Yeah, we speak a lot about storytelling. I think it's, even in some of our other episodes, we've said that reaching new audiences or reaching Gen Z, whatever we're talking about, people love storytelling. People love narrative and they love to see themselves represented. So I think you're right, positioning those topics in a way that is palatable but is also attractive. And I think this is where the creativity comes in, because when people are scrolling through, consuming all of our media, you've got 1 or 2 seconds to catch them, otherwise they're gone. So I think, the way we position our media with the message is so critical. And that's why I just find it so helpful hearing what you're saying, because charities often, with the resources, with the time, maybe they don't have a massive comms team. It's often on 1 or 2 individuals to do the whole creative output, and they might think, I just don't know how we can position this in a certain way. They'd love to just be able to get you in for 10 minutes and be like, right, Storm, what should we do here?
I've got loads of ideas.
We just want to get people thinking creatively, whatever that looks like for them.
And also something else I was thinking about is I love to watch content, and I'm a big consumer of content because I like to gain and understand new ideas and perspectives. And not too long ago, I was watching something on YouTube by a YouTube channel called The Future, and they were talking about how there are kind of 3 things that organizations, or whether it's a personal brand or an organization that they need to kind of focus on when producing content or campaigns. And the first thing was facts, the second thing was feelings, and the third thing was fun. And I was like, that's really interesting, because if you only address the facts, you only address a particular demographic. And if you only address feelings, that doesn't relate to some people either. And fun, most people like fun. So I thought it was very good. Like, and kind of if we can master that kind of segmentation, sometimes things can't be fun, which is understandable, but definitely that facts and feelings point. If that can be kind of the focus, where's the fact and where's the feeling? And then maybe where's a bit of a laugh in the middle? I think there's something there with that, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Really good, very practical. People will be writing that down. People love it when they
alliterated.
Alliteration. Storm, let's just finish by talking about your advice to charities. So you've done work with Christian charities like Christian Aid, Biblica, your CAP. You've already mentioned some of those.
Yeah.
Just encourage people, communicators, with some of the things you've seen or noticed in working and creating content with Christian organizations, and maybe some of the gaps you're seeing, some of the opportunities that you'd love Christian charities to wake up to, or to say, guys, we can do better in this. Please push into this. What would you be saying? What's your message?
I think the most important thing is to look after your staff.
Amen.
In the Christian...
Gareth?
No, I'm joking. Staff in the Christian charity sector should be and feel the most loved and cared for people. But unfortunately, what happens a lot of the time is that there's this need to keep working. It becomes overwork. God has a clear plan for what work should look like. He has a clear plan for how we should work. And that's not to say every now and again we won't overwork, or because I've definitely done it myself.
Have a busy season.
Yeah, of course. We always have busy seasons, and that's how seasons work.
Right.
But there are also times where there needs to be downtime. And if there is no downtime, if there is no time to actually decompress and, really be able to reflect, then I think what ends up happening is that people become dissatisfied, and with that dissatisfaction, they're unable to be creative. I also think there's a big thing about turning down ideas. Like, if staff come with an idea or some sort of perspective, or I think maybe we could do it this way, I think there's nothing wrong with trialing a few things out. I think you can also find a lot of information in what doesn't work versus what does work. And I think sometimes we think when something fails, it means that it wasn't worth the money or it wasn't worth the time. But actually, it means that we need to pivot. Yeah. And that's also helpful information as well. And I think the final thing is encouragement. I think encouragement goes such a long way, especially if somebody's a creative. Creatives tend to be a lot more in tune with how they feel. They're a lot more intuitive, probably a bit more introspective. And so encouraging staff to be creative and then rewarding them for that, I think is such a great way to just say, do you know what, you've done a really good job and I really value and appreciate what you do. I think that goes for all organizations, to be honest, but I feel like Christian organizations should be doing it the best.
Yes, they should lead the way. Gareth, what's that line that you've spoken to us about as a team before, where you said permission to fail?
Well, permission to fail.
I just got that wrong.
Permission to fail, but also every opportunity is either win or learn.
That's it. Win or learn.
And I think, but there does have to be a culture of being willing to fail, and we've done it. We've tried some things as an agency that haven't worked, and you need to then identify when it's not working, and not just try and flog the dead horse, but at the same time, if you haven't tried something, there's a whole load of stuff that is flying for us now that was because we tried it and we didn't know if it was going to work. We did have to invest some money, some time, of our people into it. And it's going to be the same for all creative campaign ideas and creative messaging ideas. Sometimes you just need to do it and just see if it's going to work. Yeah, a little bit of testing maybe here or there. But I think one of the things that's been really helpful for us is to expose ourselves to other sectors and to other thinking. Storm's talked about reading. There's an email called Cecile Bloom's Curiosity Chronicle, and he just has interesting stuff. It's every Friday, comes out every Friday, and it's just interesting stuff. It's completely random. It feels at times the content of it, but it's interesting bits here and there that can just spark something. And it's the same with like Campaign magazine. I've got, they just put out great campaign ideas. Following different accounts on social media, just as Storm was saying, just consuming content that is outside of your echo chamber, I think is a really good way of stimulating some of that creativity and thinking. Try not to be too much of a consumer of it, but just think, actually, how would this work with this campaign that I'm working on just now? What have they thought through to create this, and how can that then be useful here? So I think we are trying to both create an environment where people can feel like they can try something and fail. Hopefully they try things and don't fail as well.
Yeah, of course.
But also that you're kind of exposing yourself to worlds outside of your own echo chamber.
There's a really good exercise that I came across a couple of years ago, and I think it's really helpful in groups, and I think charities should definitely take this on. If somebody brings a new idea to a team discussion or whatever the case may be, instead of like, no, we can't do that, it's everybody has to go around the table and say and the and is and I'm adding something to that idea. And then by the end of that, what you discover is that actually maybe this isn't as bad of an idea as we initially thought, because the idea has kind of been refined in a process between 6 to 10 people maybe, which is really, really helpful.
That's good. I like that.
That's really clever. I'm just picturing people watching and listening to this and now booking in a retreat for the week. CEOs are going to be really happy with us that everyone's now, no, Storm said I need to go, be in nature, need to do these exercises, take my team
hug
with
a
me.
tree,
But yeah, I mean, all jokes aside, that's been really helpful, just to be practical and to think, we need to create space, permission to fail, to learn and try new things, and working what works for us as individuals, but also as a team. So that's hugely insightful. So Storm, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I believe you're up for organisations getting in touch with you if they've listened to this and thought, we'd love to get Storm in on a campaign. You'd be up for, how can people get in touch? What should they do?
Definitely up for it. They can go to my website, stormcecile.com.
Which is under work at the moment.
Which is, it's still up, but in a week's time, it will be different.
By the time this comes out.
It will be different,
that's good. Okay.
But, I mean, it's still up, but
great.
It will change. So, just Storm Cecile, or you can go to my Instagram. I'm quite active on there. Just type in Storm, like the weather, Cecile, with an E at the end.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You must get that a lot then, if you've already got that.
I do.
In your mind.
Because people spell it C-I, but it's C-E-C-I-L-E. So,
Okay, thank you both so much. Gareth, thank you.
Thanks, Liam. Appreciate it.
And we hope you've enjoyed watching or listening this episode. If you have, we'd encourage you to go over to find out more about Jersey Road on our website, which is jerseyroadpr.com, or you can go and follow us across our social media.